Hello everyone. Thank you for stopping by to find out more about the sacredness of yearning. This is the theme of the courses that I will offer in Term 4, 2022, which starts on the week of the 25th of July 2022. So let me share with you some reflections about how we are going to explore and inquire into yearning in these courses. When we think about yearning or longing or seeking, we always think that it is for something. We immediately want to locate what is it that we're yearning for, and how do we find that, and how do we stop this yearning, because we think that yearning is not really a useful thing to have. And sometimes we even think in some philosophies that we should do away with it altogether. We should not long for anything. We should not desire for anything or yearn for anything, because that makes us unhappy, it creates pain, and it creates sorrow. And sometimes when we do either of these things, when we try to suppress our yearning and longing, or when we attach it to something external and we think it's about an ambition, about a relationship, about going on the holiday or some next gadget that we have to get, or when we think it's about completely silencing it, it's as if there is a deadness within us. It's as if that yearning made us more alive, made us more present, made us passionate, and made us poetic. Even those of us who don't consider ourselves poetic, it brings out something poetic in us, something poignant, something really, really human within us. So what is it then to have a yearning that is neither about throwing it outwards and trying to service it, or trying to kind of end it with all sorts of things, or to actually try and kill it altogether, to silence it? What is it to hold yearning as a movement in and of itself? Is there an intelligence in this? In the most ancient invocations, yearning is an intelligence of itself. In fact, the ancient Atharva Veda text, which is about 4,000 years old, speaks about the dancers or apsaras flinging yearning into the world. It's like they fling it out, they just release it or unleash it in the world. And then they say, may people be mad with yearning. May they go insane with yearning. Because somehow in that liberation of not being afraid of the yearning, or not thinking that it is about something, but just in moving in this fullness of it, there is a liberation. There is a deep and elemental liberation that awakens, and it is something of the body and it's not of the mind. And this, I think, is why we are so confused about yearning, because our mind tries to wrap itself around yearning. But yearning is a multidimensional sensation because it holds memory. So there is a taste of something we know, something we remember, but then the mind can't find what is it then? What is it that we remember? And then the mind proposes all sorts of things. Is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? Is it a definition of God and the divine? A story about a god or a goddess? Is it a destination? And yet it's not, because sometimes we can arrive at the so-called destination and there is still this aching and yearning that we carry for many of us. And so the ancient wisdom was that in moving fully in that incompleteness, that eternal incompleteness of that yearning, we also come into that infinity and eternity, which of course is consciousness or the divine or the deity or the goddess or however we like to call it. So infinity cannot become something that is finite, something that is complete, or something that is contained, a destination, an arrival. It is a movement and an unfolding. And yes, it is for us a certain ache, because we do have this need to get something, And so within that eternity, we also hold this, perhaps this grief and the sorrow, but at the same time, there is the beauty of that unfolding itself, the beauty of that reaching and calling, and the beauty of expressing that yearning and calling, and some of the most beauteous forms of artistic practices all over the world has emerged from the space of this yearning within us. So in the courses, we will consider the yearning of these apsaras, the most ancient forms of yearning. And the proposal there is that in this yearning, we connect to the yearning of nature herself, of the earth herself. I don't know if you have felt, but even here when I sit here and I look at the trees around me and the movement in their branches, it's like they're yearning in how the branches just move. They're not just shapes, but they're like these movements of the trees. And that is that yearning we connect to, the yearning in the bird song. Sometimes you can really hear it in the song of the birds, how they hold this calling and yearning. Then we will also look at the yearning that is for example, of longing for the divine, longing to understand the divine, to apprehend, to comprehend. What is the divine? How do we have this? How do we understand? How do we experience this divine? But of course, that divine can never be a finite story. We fool ourselves when we think that the divine is a contained, finite story of good and bad and right and wrong, in the sense that we think is important for us to organize our lives. The divine is something infinite and eternal. And so there is this yearning in that sense of experiencing that infinite divine. And then, of course, there is also the yearning that is of love, of desire, of falling in love, of longing for the person that you love, of aching for them, of when you're parted, of feeling that ache, the longing, the missing, the memory. So all of this is that wonderful dimension, cosmos of yearning. So I'm offering 2 different courses. One is the Rasa dance class, where I will teach a dance of yearning that is inspired by the women's spells or the women's songs or the women's incantations from the 4,000-year-old Atharva Veda text. And in the dance contemplation course, we will unpack the many dimensions of yearning through some really amazing archetypes, including the ancient apsaras from the Atharva Veda, the archetype of the great warrior Arjuna and his friendship, mentorship, love, connection, companionship with the great god Krishna, and also the beautiful poetry and song of the love between Krishna and Radha, their secretive and hidden love for each other, and the parting that was ever present in the love that they had for each other. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this beautiful cosmos of yearning, and I really hope that in our invocation together, we will hold for the world in these times the intelligence of beauty, poignancy, of sorrow, but also of great love, and how the most beauteous expression of this is the artistic expression. And it is in its essence something that is an intelligence of the body, because it is a multi-dimensional, fragile, glimmering, and yet ferocious constellation, this cosmos of yearning.